Hey, welcome everybody to Trash Talk, 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, and we're glad you're here. We appreciate all the
Yeah,
comments, the emails, the phone calls, the drones that are flying around over our houses.
the Facebook blocking, the
Yes,
um, the warnings, the criticisms.
yeah.
Cheers, enjoy.
Didn't you have somebody from Facebook knock on your door to ask you about your car warranty?
Yeah, right. Probably.
It's-
I'm gonna be really mad if the aliens invade us and they all look like that guy.
I know,
So,
hey, I know you.
right?
It's, but hey, I thought we'd talk a little bit of music. Hey, it's only rock and roll. Uh, but we got into a discussion this past weekend all about music, and uh, Brandon and I both been very involved in music in a lot of different ways over the years, from managing and promoting and securing and hiring and in my case playing. Uh,
Yeah.
we said, hey, we'll talk a little bit about music and about instruments. And I said to him, did you ever play any instruments? You ever took lessons on anything? You went to
Yeah.
school or?
I never took lessons. I've always been around music, I think. Probably not as much as maybe some others, but I feel like in my life, the majority of it, I've always been involved in music. Not just a fan of. And when I say fan, I don't just mean like, oh my God, I like this band, but I mean like learning about the band and where they came from, how they wrote the songs, those documentaries that go beyond just the behind the music. I've always been that, but I've always been involved with it. I've had a ton of friends that have played guitar, played drums, played piano, played in bands, and I've always been a part of that. I never took lessons. Um, there was a time I had this guy that I went to church with back in the day, and it was him and his sister. And really, I started talking to him because I really enjoyed his sister. So we'll just let's just be real about that. But
I like you,
um,
guy, but you are a middleman.
right, that's all he was. Because I thought he was a nice guy. I just didn't care. Um, and I hung out with his sister for a little bit before she moved. And anyway, but so him and I started to actually kind of become friends inadvertently. And he was one of those guys that just had natural talent on the piano. I know he took lessons, but I could just tell by the way that he did it that he knew he just he just had it. So he taught me some stuff, and for about 6 months, which isn't a long time, him and I would do stuff. And am I good? Do I remember any of it? No. Did I stick with it? Absolutely not. But it was one of those moments.
Yeah, and I started playing piano when I was about, I think, 7 or 8 years old. Started taking lessons. There was a woman that lived on the next block where I grew up who had a baby grand piano in her living room, and every afternoon after school there were kids that were taking lessons from her. I don't remember her name, but she taught me how. But the thing was, I started playing classical, and most kids, you get bored real quick with playing
Oh,
classical piano and all. And I wanted to do a little bit more than that. I was back, as we're back in the days of jitterbug and boogie woogie and jazz and stuff, and that appealed to me. She gave me the name of a man that taught jazz piano. And by the time I got to about high school, I was playing jazz piano and really loving it.
nice.
And then I was following people like Dave Brubeck and Ahmad Jamal and some of those early jazz guys, and even going to when I got a little older, we used our fake IDs to get into places like the London House in Chicago to watch some of these guys play, and trios mostly, uh,
Sure.
and that was cool. I kept at piano, and then in high school I also was in a rock and roll band and all that, played mostly local tunes of that period of time. And then many years later in the 80s, a bunch of guys, I heard about a bunch of guys that were playing just jamming in some guy's garage. and they were making too much noise. And the police were called to tell them that they got to shut down because they were making too much noise and the neighbors were complaining. I heard about it and I said, I got to know more about this band. Do they have a keyboard player? And
Sure.
ended up getting into a band for about 5 years. We were all in our 50s and all, and played good old rock and roll from the 60s and 70s. And that was pretty cool. But all the time that I played piano, I wanted to play guitar. And I played a little bit and all, but I was never very proficient at it, and still am not. But there were back in the 60s and 70s and all. You were at a time when people started experimenting with synthesizers and with electronic music. And for a lot of people, it was a lot easier to learn electronic instruments than it was real instruments.
Well, yeah, I think there's so many different levels of that, you know. I mean, guitar to me is great. You know, Luke is pretty fascinated with the guitar and the drums, more so the guitar nowadays.
Uh-huh.
And he's picked up on things. I have a friend of mine that is musician, you know, and he has showed Luke things, and Luke has picked up on it, even the way he holds it and he has the guitar pick. I see it. Whether we go anywhere, and I'll give him that opportunity, but
Right.
that's one thing. He is definitely a music kid, so I encourage all that. But I was the same way. I think guitar is great. I never could quite do that, but I definitely picked up on especially DJing and mixing and putting music together, like we did back when we had, you know, I had a promotion company for a long time, and I
Oh, I
had
didn't
about
know
four.
that.
Yeah, I did. I had about four different artists under my quote unquote, we'll just say label, just to sound cool. And we put a lot, we worked a lot with in Detroit. There was a festival, it's the Detroit Electronic Music Festival, it's called DEMF. And then they changed it to now it's just called Movement. And it's every year, it's every Labor Day weekend. Or is it Memorial Day? Can't remember. And we were there every year, from fans to actually DJing. And the last time I DJ'd ever, like truly DJ'd, was 11 years ago. I flew back to Detroit to DJ on one of the stages there, and it was kind of a reunion of our artists. And I had two girl DJs, phenomenal DJs from Chicago. And I had another gentleman that was more of like into that. He reminded me a lot of the Depeche Mode style
Uh-huh.
tracks and all that, but he sang, and we did a whole kind of reunion. And when I was doing that stuff with mixing and layering and scratching and fading and all that, I was learning from these other artists, and they taught me a lot. But it was really cool because we went to Canada, Chicago, Philly, Detroit, Wisconsin, and did like a little quasi tour. And I was picking up things. They were teaching me different stuff. So that was really fun. That was really fun.
Yeah. I was really brought up in the acoustic age, before the Beatles, back in the folk era. And I still very much enjoy acoustic music,
Sure.
because everything has gotten very electrified. But the idea is what you're doing with Luke is to share and pay forward that love of music with your son, because I think it's very important that the kids get a broad spectrum of music, not just get into hip hop or rap or one genre or another and all, but have an appreciation for all of them, so that you can go sit on a hill sometime and listen to a chamber orchestra sometime. Another time you might go and listen to a rock band, and it could be a small group like Bad Company or something, which is basically like four pieces. Or you can go see somebody like Chicago or Earth, Wind, and Fire, which is, like almost full band orchestra type. It's to expand in those ways. Always wanted to do that. I think every kid has a
Sure.
dream when they first learn to play an instrument of maybe getting into a band and doing it. And I encourage it, even if it's
I
a,
do too. I do.
garage band or something with some friends. Just
We
do
have
it.
a place by us, literally in walking distance, that does focus on kids, and it's rock. It teaches them stuff about their guitars.
Yep.
But just the other night, Luke and I went out, and they do concerts and stuff at different venues. But Luke and I went out the other night, and they had the doors open, and we could hear what they were doing. And I recognized one of the songs, and I walked by, and I'm like, man, they never have the doors open. So we walked in, and they were like, yeah, come on in. And it was they just opened it because I guess it was getting stuffy in there.
Yeah.
And we just watched these kids jam out. And we're talking 10, 11, jamming out, playing everything from Queen to AC/DC to the Yeah, Yeah, Yes. And like Luke was into it. And then Luke, he doesn't come across shy, but he can be initially. And he was a little shy, but this girl went up to him. She was a bass guitar player, started talking to him. And Luke was just mesmerized. So I'm like, that whatever happens, you're exploring that library, that buffet of music, if you will. And maybe he'll pick up something or tell me he has an interest, whether it's the drums, the guitar, who knows, piano, keyboards. And I think music's such an important part of life, whatever the case may be.
And as you say, it used to be you waited until you got to junior high or high school to pick up a clarinet or a saxophone or a trumpet or something, and you played in the school band, and that usually faded away once you got out of school. But as you said, you're getting kids down now into the grade school levels that are picking up instruments, and
that's the way to do it.
Yeah, and by the time they're 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, they're getting kind of proficient. And then they go to a school like the one that we've got in town, and the directors of those schools listen to the talents that these kids have, and then they blend it together and say, let's take the 6 of you and put it together, and let's try and do something. And it creates a love for the music and for the playing aspect of it for the kids. That was something that we never really had when we were growing up. If you got into high school, if you either couldn't make an athletic team or you didn't want to go out for athletics, then band or theater were the only other options that you had. And so a lot of kids would get involved in band, which I mean, I did that. I played clarinet for a while, didn't really enjoy the instrument. And that was before they had electronic pianos. So, playing piano, you couldn't really go places and that where you could easily play piano. But today there's so much that's electronic drums, electronic guitars, electronic, like you mentioned, mixing boards that will make all kinds. The one thing you probably remember, I don't remember the name of the album, but Stevie Wonder did an album where he played absolutely every instrument on every song that he wrote on that album. I want to say, was it Music in the Key of Life or something like that?
Sounds familiar.
But you would listen to that, and it had everything from strings to horns to woodwinds to drums to guitars, and he would just add track after track after track. And if you looked at the liner notes on the back of the album, every instrument was played by Stevie Wonder. And there are some incredible people out there that can and will do something like that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. But the real fun of it is, man, getting together and jamming with other people.
That's it. That's it. And that's why we jam out a lot. Luke and I jam out, and it might not be anything, but it's funny because, we recently went on a trip and we were playing his playlist, and he's got a playlist. It's so wild to me because, some of the songs obviously are my influence, on him. But then I hear songs, I'm like, oh, where'd you find that? He's like, oh, I found it on Spotify. And I'm like, you're 5.
Yeah.
You found it on spot. You don't even know how to spell that, you know? And he's like, yeah, well, it popped up. And I think it was like a suggested song. And I'm like, and I love it because now he's exploring and he'll tell me what he likes about it. Oh, I like this part, Dad. Listen. I like, and it's not, it could just be a beat, a guitar riff, the way that the vocalists change. And so yeah, you know, I mean, it's amazing now. You have to start those kids young because their minds are not clouded. They're super absorbent. Their brains are functioning at a higher level than probably ours are.
Yeah.
And you just, it's cool. So I love jamming out. I love doing that with the music. And yeah, I probably should have dived into a lot more when I was in high school.
Well, but you know, to a certain extent, you did, because what you may not have been able to pick up those instruments and play them, but you had an appreciation of those instruments to the point where when you got into the hospitality industry, and one element of that was getting the musical
Absolutely.
aspect, you had to have an appreciation of who to put up on that stage to appeal to the patrons.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, you're right. That and that was probably, if I miss anything about the hospitality business or the bar scene or whatever you want to call it, it is probably that. It's the musical events that and the booking of all these amazing artists and people that I've got to meet over the years, some of whom I'm still talk to, others that I've seen them grow and move on to the next level. That has been one of the highlights, you know,
And it's
by
kind of
far.
cool when you see somebody that has really made it on, you know, and entertaining in big stadiums like the one behind
Yes.
me, and you say, I knew them when they appeared on a stage in that small bar in Detroit, and we're just starting out. It,
Right. I mean, I knew a girl that I booked at a bar here in Frisco, Texas. It's no longer there. Probably one of the best bars I've ever worked at. And she is huge now. She's touring with Parker McCollum, who's a massive country star. And I'm watching it and I'm like, man, I remember when she was there on a Friday night and there were 60 people. And that was a cool night because it was just 60
yeah,
chilling, having a good time, you know.
there's a young lady here from Frisco, Grace Tyler,
I
who's
know Grace. Yeah.
who's started out as a solo act in a couple of little local lounges and all when she was like 16 years old. She
Yes.
really could belt out a song, but when she stepped off the stage and you talked to her, she was just the most timid little thing and shy.
Little. I remember I did an interview with her at the last big country concert that we had off the rails here, that 2 day festival.
Yeah,
And you're talking with the likes of Luke Combs and big boys. And
yep,
she was performing, and right after that, she was taking off. She
yep.
was going to
And
Nashville.
now all of a
Well,
sudden her star is rising. And I mean,
yeah,
that's what it's all about. That's what it's really all about. But enjoying the music, picking up and playing an instrument or sharing it is kind of a reward in itself. And
yeah,
you know, take our advice, and if you got kids, get them involved in music some way, shape, or form, because it'll be something that will travel with them throughout their lives.
absolutely.
And also pick up your instruments and everything, and come back next Tuesday morning, and we'll jam together again. Okay. Until then, it's only rock and roll, but I like it. Yes, I do. Bye.